DPK Pillay, who has had a distinguished career in the Indian Army spanning 29 years. He was awarded the Shaurya Chakra for his gallantry in evacuating wounded children in Manipur. He has had several field assignments and was selected for Project Beta, which delivered a handheld PDA for use by the infantry in counter-insurgency operations. He is currently pursuing research on violent extremism at Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. He is also a member of the Advisory Committee for Commemoration of the First War with Pakistan. Colonel Pillay holds a PhD from Punjab University and regularly conducts international humanitarian law training for UN missions. It's an absolute delight to welcome, sir. May I please request the IT team to put up the presentation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this honor and inviting me here and share the stage with such distinguished. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy as the chair of the T20, Ambassador Vijay Nambiar, and Dr. Vinod Menon and Dr. Sunena, and distinguished guests here and your students. Firstly, it's an honor for me to be here because my mother was a great devotee of Mata Amritandamayi, and she passed away last year, and I think it's a blessing that I'm here today and hearing her because, can I just change this like this? Okay. So she used to come very often here to the ashram when she was well, and there was like when we heard in the morning, when we heard Mata Amritandamayi give the message that, you deliver, there are two ways of doing things. There are always the hard way and the easier way, the mirage. And I think the stories that were recounted by Amrita Swarupananda ji about the Mahabharata, and then you remember that, when we read about the Mahabharata, we read about Abhimanyu breaking the Chakravyuh. It is something that he learned in the womb of his mother, and he learned there's something that when you're being nourished by you inculcate certain values, by being born in a particular family, by being born in a particular society, being born in the values that have been constantly. So when Ambassador Chinoy told me to speak on human rights and human values, learning from India, I said, sir, I can't really match the bandwidth that you have and the kind of stage, the panelists that I have here. He says, no, you're the right person to speak, because I said you must speak. And I'll just share this video here. How do I play this? There's a video. Can you just tell them to play? So this is the story not about me or anyone. It's just
in the northeast of the country, soldiers of the army have often been accused of indiscriminately attacking innocent people in the battle against militancy. There are clear exceptions. This is the story of how an Indian Army officer nearly died, saving the life of a young girl, and returned to her village to find the man, a former militant, who had shot him. Keshalay Bhattacharjee has this special report.
An unusual reunion. A mother crying inconsolably after meeting an army officer who had saved her daughter and grandson's life, almost sacrificing his own years ago. And even more unusual is this meeting. The army officer hugging a former militant. They both came close to killing each other 16 years ago in the same attack. On 25th January 1994, Captain DPK Pillay was out on a patrol. That night, when he reached El Pabram, 4 militants were waiting for him. In a fierce gun battle, one of them died, and Pillay was grievously injured. He saw a young girl also injured in the crossfire. When the helicopter arrived to evacuate him, he insisted the girl be saved first. And as a dying wish, he convinced his men and his officers not to launch any attack on the village sheltering the militants. Pillay recovered and recently established contact with El Pabram and journeyed back to the village. The reunion was touching.
It's amazing to come back here to something that anyone would do, I think, because she didn't know what the reason why she's got shot. I knew what I was there for. They knew what they were fighting for. But what is their fault? So I think we owed them.
Village chairman Mr. Atanbo remembers every moment of that night.
उस समय पिल्लाई साहब ने माफ कर दिया हम लोग को जीवन भर में भूलेगा नहीं.
Masiliu, the girl who was caught in the crossfire, is now a mother. Dingamang, the 6-year-old nephew of Masiliu, was also injured in that gunfight. But Pillay wasn't prepared for this encounter, to come face to face with the man who had shot him.
Actually, I have a picture of him with me 16 years ago. Yeah, I can't.
Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that so this is not just my story or a story. This is the story of an Indian soldier, like we've been trying to say about the role Ambassador Nambiar talked about. Ambassador Chinoy also spoke about the kind of issues that we've been dealing with. So it is something that inherently comes to every Indian. It's something that we learn. So you don't need a universal declaration of human rights to actually recognize the rights of others, develop compassion in you. These are stories that you hear. So when you hear about Ashwatthama still languishing around because he killed young innocent children, and having to live being cursed to be an immortal and to suffer constantly, is because he did something totally unethical. And when you hear about Draupadi forgiving Ashwatthama for the murder of her children, it is something that shows that forgiveness, reconciliation is something that has been ingrained in us. It culturally comes down into the way we live, the way we talk, the way we conduct ourselves. It is something that is there in all our. So even though the rest of the world, for them, it was a big thing, the liberty, freedom, and all those things, those ideas that came in along with the French Revolution and the American, Independence, Declaration of Independence, and others. For us, it has been part of our life. We don't need a universal declaration of recognition, where we say that all human beings are equal because of just by the fact that they are human. It is there ingrained in all our things. You see the Ashokan edicts, which you find, just deployed all over. So I was in Iraq for a while as a military advisor, and that area, the Levant, is a place where 3 great religions of the world have been born: Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and others. And they talk about, the Cyrus cylinder in which, but when you compare that with your own civilizational things that are there, mentioned in your Rig Vedas and the Atharva Veda, you realize that we've got much more wisdom and knowledge. And, there's this Hammurabi's code, which is so brutal, actually, in many ways. You find that. But yet, we don't find that in our everyday discourse. I don't know how, the Western people have kindly omitted this. So you find this, this is the site of Kalinga, the elephant that you see on the right. It is a rock inscription that has been put up in that place after, which lays out exactly, which clearly even says the kind of trees that cannot be cut, which is something which is really unimaginable today. That is like 2000 years ago, around 300 BC or whatever. So it's amazing that they could even think about the kind of people who are protected, the people who are going to be protected. That he very clearly says that these tribes are protected under the Priyadarshini's protection. They cannot be harmed, So those are things that if you go to these places, you will find the translation of these edicts. You'll find this, it will be something that is very inspiring. So like I already said that, it is there. This is a Rig Veda hymn, and compare it with the UDHR of 1948, in which Eleanor Roosevelt played a great role. But this very clearly says that no one is superior or inferior, because all are brothers and should strive for the interest of all and should progress collectively. And even in Chanakya's Arthashastra or the concept of Ram Rajya, where you find the kings used to go in disguise, to find out how the subjects are. It's mentioned very clearly in Arthashastra, which is something which is an amazing document. The kind of knowledge and wisdom that this has, and that has been handed down to us culturally. So it doesn't really matter, and these things which are talked about, the right to physical liberty, right to shelter, right to life, these are all part of our everyday scores. So when India became independent in 1947, these are the things that were promised to us, where we have social, economic, and political justice. We have an equality of status, opportunity before law. It doesn't matter which sex you belong to, which race you belong to, which tribe you belong to. And there was freedoms. Now, how do we understand that? Have we walked the talk? Because there were two countries that became independent around the same time. There was Pakistan, created on the basis of religion, and there was an East Pakistan, and there was a Western wing of Pakistan, and there was India, which was there. Now, if you see the first elections of this country, I often wonder, I used to wonder, why is that we have a symbol? But it's so wise of those people at that time that they realized that more than 90%, 80% of our people are illiterate, and they didn't know how to recognize letters. And they said that, okay, there was a sign and you have to vote for that sign. And till today, we continue that. And we have made sure, our election commission makes sure that even for one man's vote, they deploy helicopters to go there and carry out something that is so fascinating. And that is something that our aim of our country has been to mainstream our people into it. So you don't find any stories of, like when you heard about the Peshawar school attack in 2015, next day they announced that they've killed 100 militants. We don't have that kind of a disproportionate response. Even here, what happened in East Pakistan, which is a Muslim country, and they were Muslims, there was a cyclone that struck them in December 1970. Over 5 million people were killed and displaced. But the West Pakistanis didn't recognize the equivalence of them as fellow Muslims, fellow citizens, and they failed in delivering aid and everything. So this is one of the first climate-induced disasters, if we can also be counting that. And they completely ignored them. There was anger. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, a tall leader in his own right, he came to power. The Western wing couldn't accept the fact that a Bengali would be, and then they unleashed Operation Searchlight, and and Ambassador Nambiar talked about the responsibility to protect. And that is the time, like we were on the menu of the powers. We were not on the high table. We were being eaten up. Like the Western powers were actually, Henry Kissinger and Nixon established contact with China at that time and asked them to intervene. They had the 7th Fleet moving here. But India did what was expected, and what was failing in Rwanda, what was failing in Srebrenica, and that's something. We took care of 10 million refugees, and then we intervened and we established a new country, Bangladesh today, which fares much better than its parent country in many parameters. In fact, even it beats India in many things. So if that's the responsibility that we've actually walked the talk. It's not just in allowing our own people, but even in the case of the AIDS epidemic in the early, when AIDS had come as a disease, I was a young boy just out of college. I remember there was a deadly disease, and we all knew that if you got it, you died, and the treatment was so expensive. And then, somewhere in 1970s, India had come up with a patent act, which we said that, we can't be paying patent money for products that are for indefinitely. We were paying for phenol, something like a patent, to a company that didn't even own it. And that's when the government of India decided that we patented the process, not the product. And because of which we could really manufacture, which was required. And then when AIDS became an epidemic, the way it was, what did we do? We came up with $1 a day treatment. Cipla had a cocktail of 3 drugs. And when it was presented in the United Nations that they would go, there was an entire lobby of the Western nations, because the top 10 pharmaceutical companies are richer than the rest of the 500 in the Fortune 500. They lobbied against Indian drugs, and they made ads showing that if you ate an Indian drug, you became a snake, or you became those kind of advertisements came out. But yet we persisted, and today the world, it was costing $15,000 and it came down to $360. And then people in Africa and the poorer nations could actually counter this scourge of equity. And then we've seen that in food crisis. We were living in I grew up in a time where we, even though my father was in the army, I know that we got limited rations. We got 5 liters of kerosene oil, because if you're in Jorat, you needed that Petromaxes and everything. We got 5 kgs of wheat. And why did we get that kind of a thing? Because Lyndon B. Johnson, the president of the United States, had put us on a 1-month leash. So the food used to come only if we behaved, because Indira Gandhi had spoken up against the Vietnam, what is happening in Vietnam. And they put us on a 1-month leash, and the food wouldn't be available. And that's the time that we turned around our disadvantage into something. So if you go to Africa today, or you go to any of these countries, they look up to us because we come like them out of colonization. We've broken our shackles from that completely period of colonization, and we've done what we are. Even recently, in the natural calamities that we've seen, we've done a very great job every time without any, there are no strings attached. And we don't have our aid workers roaming around in, Pajeros and Land Cruisers, which spend more money, and they deliver the aid that is delivered. I work for an international aid agency, the Red Cross, and I've seen how we work in, those conflict zones of Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. And I felt guilty in many ways, because the kind of money that we splurged on ourselves was like probably a family would live for that for a month. Even now in Corona, when the world struck, we didn't have PPEs, we didn't have vaccination, but we became the pharmacy of the world. We delivered, and this has been something that we can all really be proud of, the vaccine Maitri. And I wouldn't like to speak about this now anymore, because I would get the foreign minister of Gabon to speak. Can you please click that? Can you just click? Now he's speaking about
India has to take care of 1.3 billion people. In a democracy with smooth transitions, can you imagine having to take care of 1.3 billion people and still having the time at the policy level to say, let us look to see what we can do for the rest of the world, when multilateral institutions should be doing that? So I will dare say that India is a multilateral institution in its own right. In its own right. When you think about their commitment to humanity, India obviously is providing leadership at a global governance level, and that is commendable for one country, 75 years old. Think about it. In our lifetime, we have industrialized economies that were never colonized, some who were colonized centuries old in terms of their post-independence. But you don't get the same attitude and commitment and conviction as you can get from India.
So it's something that we can all be proud of. He may say that we are a 75-year-old country, but we are actually an ancient country. And today we celebrate Ram Navami. It's an ancient, it's something that, if you read the Ramayana and you read the geography, I can't describe my directions to my own house, which I come and go. But if you read the Ramayana and you see the description of the Ram, the thing, and how he's gone to Sri Lanka, and the Park Strait today, which they call Ram Setu and others. And even in the Mahabharata, when they describe those things, it is amazing to imagine that somebody could be so precise about all this. We are an ancient country, and we've grown stronger with every influence that has come to us. We can't be exclusive. We are an inclusive country. Like, we've adapted, we've assimilated them. So like you see, Bangladesh was broken away because they didn't assimilate them. Whereas if you can look at all the problems that we had inherited from the time of 1947, there was a war foisted in Kashmir, which is an artificial war. Essentially, it was the Europeans, the British wanted to have a toehold in that region, because it was their fascination for that Rudyard Kipling's great game and everything. They wanted to continue to be there. And they created an artificial, which is never meant to be a haven for anyone. It proved themselves wrong in 25 years. They broke apart. So the fact is that it was never. But you see, we had problems in Kashmir, we had problems in Assam, in Manipur, Nagaland, Tripura, and others. Today, you find them all. Former insurgents, our DG hosted a former insurgent who was the head of the Liberation Tripura, the Mizoram National Chief Minister now, Zoramangtong. He came over and was very proud to say. So what have we achieved? We've mainstreamed an opposition. Somebody who took up arms against us today is now talking to us and being part of the system. And that is the strength of our country. That's the strength of our civilization, where we don't destroy. I think that is the thing. And this is a universal prayer that we have, which is something that we which is something which is very fashionable, where it talks about, may everyone be happy. Pursuit of happiness is a right for everyone. It's not like, it's and may everyone be healthy. And that's what we've done in our thing. So, and free of illness and others. So I'll end with this. Thank you very much for this honor and privilege.